Thank you so much, Program Director and good doctor, Honorable Chair, and the entire House. It's not going to be much from me. I was listening, Doctor, as we're presenting. And I thought maybe from the South African Police Service, I want to thank everyone here today for taking time to come here and share the ideas with us. We are charged with the responsibility to make sure that we provide safety for all of you in the Republic. Of course, we can't do that alone. We need your support. And we also need your guidance for us to be able to perform the task. So I want to, on behalf of the SAPS, to appreciate all of you for coming in. As I read the purpose of this gathering, there are 4 goals, I think, that were prioritized from what I saw. One of them was to gather everyone together here for the purpose of listening to the people affected by the crime, especially the gang violence, and get the inputs from them, and also to examine the actual ground root causes of this problem, so that maybe Parliament can come up with solution. And also to assess the state interventions, policies, the structures that the government is deploying for us to be able to fight the scourge, and also the policy reforms that perhaps government may need to look at. So I think those are the 4 things that I saw that was a priority for us coming here together. So we've been here and listening to different presenters, and I appreciate them for taking time and do those research papers that they delivered here. We hope we can get copies of the presentation that was made here today. So that as management of the SAPS, we can be able to reflect and readjust ourselves, taking guidance from those research papers and presentation experience that people have that were presented here today. Let me focus my input in order to, on these 4 goals that the Portfolio Committee on Policing outlined today, but I'm going to try and group them, Honorable Chair. I'll group the gathering of information from the ground level as well as the examining the root causes. As the scholars will define the gangs, and they always refer to a group of people who have a common purpose, which is criminality in the main. This group of people that come together for the bad things. That's what scholars, that's what they say. I'm just summarizing on a definition that I've read. So it is important then when we are here to ask ourselves, what are the causative factors of this gang, the formation of the gang, how the gangs are established, and what causes them then to be involved in violence in the main. And when we look at it as a South African Police Service, most of the time, we find that the answer rests with mainly 2 things. It's a group of boys and some girls that joins in that want some identity amongst themselves. So the identity then is defined by different things. They give themselves names, and by and largely DCS assist them in prison, the gang numbers, that they form themselves and they group themselves into numbers. And from there, then they develop culture of how they live. But more importantly, then they have to have a certain lifestyle. That's the second important thing. So their lifestyle needs to be supported by loot, by money. So, and what then they do, then they establish different trades that they enter into for them to be able to sustain their lifestyle. One of them is drugs. Some of it is human trafficking, especially for children, and others illicit goods that they participate in many. Nowadays, the gangs are even getting involved in tenders, just so that they can sustain the lifestyle. So that's basically why when we deal with gangs, we need to understand broadly of this group of people come together, what is their main purpose? They just want to have this certain lifestyle. So firearms, stolen vehicles, and many other things are really used as tools for them to be able to deliver, to get this what they want. If they can sell without shooting each other, they will do so. But because they fight over territory, so they feel they need to employ a certain task. So in trying to address these 2 in terms of gathering input from the public, I feel that, Doctor, and with your with your scholars. I understand that you are here with your master students and the likes. And I'm sure there are many academias, scholars out there that are watching from home. And I'm sure they will be able to assist Parliament and in making sure that as we are doing this research in terms of trying to gather information from the public, it's not only left with yourself and those that are here, even the others that are outside are going to be able to give inputs to support Parliament, but we have to expand your research and reach out to those that are involved, the gangs. They say we can't solve a problem, our problem without us. That's what people will do. So there are different gangs that are operating, especially in the Cape Flats. You have gangs in the township, I'll call it Kala Township. I hope I'm politically correct. In the Kala Township, they behave different. There was a good old man that was here. I think he knows the number. I saw him showing some signs and stuff. So it's a different group that. Then we've got the emerging group that is here in the Western Cape, in the Black Township. They've got a different approach. They operate completely different than what you find in the Kala Township. Then you've got the foreign gangs that are operating in the suburbs, in the cities. They are here, down the road, around the most expensive suburbs, Cape Points and the likes. So those are sophisticated crew. So these are all the gangs that are contributing to the problems that we have in the country. So we'll have to expand and get to those gangs so that we can understand exactly what is the problem, why do they do what they do? Because I believe we sitting here might not be able to solve a problem that we don't know. Until we get the people that are part of it, they will be able to tell you. Those that are willing to tell you, they'll tell you, okay, no, this is how we do. The good financial companies that want to protect hackers from their systems, they employ hackers to be employed in a bank so that the hacker can be able to develop a system to protect hacking other hackers from coming in. So that idioms of saying you send a thief to catch a thief, I think is something that we might really have to look at, because honestly, we might not survive without using those people that really understand the system. That's why in the police we employ intelligence. I've said it before. We have to recruit people to get them into the criminal system so that they feed us with information. Well, Chair, that's what we did with IDEC. That's why we knew much about them. And the second part, the assessment of the state intervention, as well as the policing reforms. And I feel that it is important that people must be guided by rules, otherwise we'll live in a jungle. We know the laws of the jungle. It's a survival of the fittest. So until there are rules, we will become a different society. So we gather here today in this house where rules are made. And I do hope that the Parliament is going to take serious look at the rules that have been set out by government to govern society, how society must behave. And there are three main things that we always trying to focus on, at least that I look at. I'm not a parliamentarian, I'm not a politician, but the main three things that we always consider if we want to have a good society out there is that there must be public safety as the first thing. And the second thing must be provision of public services out there. And of course, the third thing is to ensure that there's financial well-being of society. So why I say the three things? In the public safety, there are four focus areas that I want to highlight, Honorable Chair and members. That, in our opinion, we need to review our legislation in order to remove weaknesses in our laws. So the legislation the laws that we pass must punish the wrongdoers. It cannot be that a person does wrong and gets rewarded by the taxpayers. It becomes a double jeopardy for the victim. So we have to punish the wrongdoers and be able to remove in our laws, remove the systems that are going to encourage people to do more. We must never make a prison life comfortable. We know that back in the days, someone said is an old correctional service person who used to work with Nelson Mandela and them. I'm not sure back then the prisons were, prisoners were getting a stipend from government to work. Nowadays, if you want the prisoner to come and clean this house, you're going to pay them for it. That's a reality, what we have made life to be in prison. So the legislation might need to be looked at so that we can strengthen there where there's weaknesses. And then what I'm saying, for instance, on legislation, there are many challenges that we have. One of them, as I move off to the next one, which is law enforcement, that our institutional design in terms of enforcing the laws in the country, we need to look at. Typical example is we've got different entities. We have the South African Police Service, Mkhwanazi wearing a badge, SAPS. But, and SAPS is the only institution that the Constitution of the Republic under Section 205 gave powers to conduct the policing work, to protect society, nobody else. But the acts that are passed by Parliament have introduced a number of law enforcement institutions. The doctor was saying there must be this cooperation with Metro. The Metro don't exist in the Constitution, but they exist in the laws that were passed by this House. And then we find ourselves in conflict out there. Section 7 of the NPA Act is in contradiction with the constitutional section that established NPA. NPA's job is to prosecute. But the Section 7 of the NPA Act introduced the investigation, which is contradicting the Constitution of the Republic with Section 205 that talks about the police that must conduct investigation. So these conflicts, the conflicting sections of our legislations are part of the problem. So we have, through the Section 7 of the NPA Act, we then re-established scorpions into the hawks. So the hawks were brought into the SAPS, and there were court challenges that the hawks cannot fall under SAPS because of independence and so forth, until court judgments were issued. And as a result, we have the hawks within the police that does not account to the National Commission. And the Constitution talks about one man in charge of the service, or one woman, and that's a National Commission. But the Act of Parliament introduced the hawks not to report to the very same National Commission, to report elsewhere. And that's why there's a conflict between the SAPS, ordinary blue uniform, and the DPCI. That's why criminals find it easy to capture DPCI so they can corrupt the whole system of the SAPS. So these are the challenges that we have. It's one organization, but we have these two separation inside. And then beyond that, we have established IDEC. We've given them policing powers. The Constitution doesn't recognize that. And they don't listen to the police. We have BMA that were passed recently, established as their own law enforcement in the borders. They're fighting tooth and nail to get the policing powers. They've still been debated to date. We have IP that have got policing powers. They investigate. They don't only deal with police misconduct on the execution of their job, but there's a section in Sector 8 that allows the national director to initiate any criminal investigation against the police if they so wish. That's why we've seen a lot of problems in the past. We have Metro Police that exist because of the laws that are passed by Parliament. And these Metro Police, some of them work with the police, SAPS, some of them don't want to take orders. And one typical example was the former boss here at the city of Cape Town. I don't even remember he ever attended any of our coordinating meetings with the Metro Police, because he was more powerful than the National Commission. So that's why we find the problem. So we have to ask ourselves, when government establish all these law enforcement agencies, are they supposed to be there or not supposed to be there? Perhaps the question that needs to be asked, is the Constitution that gives the powers to one entity still relevant in this country? With the sheer size of the country that we have, that ranges on about a 4.8 kilometer stretch of the land port, the land line that we have with 6 countries neighboring us, We have a coastline of at least 2.7 kilometers that we have to police, that include number of provinces. Can one woman or man as a national commission be responsible for that? Or we have to review that in the constitution and say, this section 205 in the constitution perhaps is part of the problem. We might have to take lessons from other countries out there of how they divide this workload. Is our design suitable for the challenges that we're experiencing to date? So I'm not saying that I'm fighting for the dominance of the ACPS in fighting crime, but I'm challenging us to think about whether is it still necessary to have one entity that is controlling one central part of the country to be responsible for safety of the citizens of the Republic. So we have to ask ourselves a question. Perhaps the establishment of all these other entities is indication that we need to diverse somehow and differentiate between what is done at the national level and what is done at different provincial levels. So it's a challenge that I think we need to look at. We need to look at the officer that we employ in these law enforcement agencies that we have. Are we employing, are we recruiting a gangster? We have generals perhaps that are currently in the police that grew up as members of the gangs until they joined the police and they finished the college and they got promoted throughout. And then you trust that the generals are going to come with a solution, and yet they are members of the gangs themselves. So what are the security measures we put in place to make sure that we prevent such from happening? And that's not only within the SCPS, it's across the entire law enforcement. Courts, Honorable Chair, the courts, I will look at them as involving three different officers there of the court. One of them are the lawyers. We have a legal practice council that exists in the country that regulates how the lawyers must behave. We cannot give you the names, but we know the names of the lawyers that are paid. Someone presented here that the lawyers, I think it was a brigadier, who said the lawyers come to court and pay the bail for the person arrested without even that person affording the bail. They know that they are paying on behalf of, they're paying this one, they're going to collect it from the boss gang who's somewhere else. That's how the lawyers survive these days. You see them making noise, fighting to the nail to make sure they clear their clients, hiding under this disguise of, say, it's a client lawyer privilege. But and then almost all of them, they run with what are these accounts, they call them? Because they don't use their personal account. Trust account. They've got trust account where the client puts the money into the trust account. They collect money cash. How can a person, a 17-year-old unemployed, get arrested, caught with drugs, and he is represented by a senior advocate who charges 20,000 rand an hour? The logic tells everyone that this lawyer is funded by crime. It tells you that. We've got big high-profile people that are currently standing before different institutions that are represented by senior counsels. We know that those people are not paying them. They're being paid by others somewhere else. So I think the legal process council might need to come on board and look at this person who's representing someone in court. Prosecutors, recruitment, training, development, rewards, and punishment of those prosecutors is something that might need to be looked at. We've seen a lot of challenges as we are dealing with these problems since last year, July, that there's so much restrictions on prosecutions and there's so much freedom on what they can do on their own. A typical example, a police officer can come from Pretoria and get to Cape Town. If he sees crime outside there, he will arrest. He will detain. He goes to court and present the matter, but not with the prosecutor. The prosecutor can't come from Gauteng and NZA and go to court and preside over a matter. It needs to be delegated, a function. So if this director here does not want to delegate the function, tough luck, he cannot prosecute. We find it difficult challenge as we speak in dealing with the Madlanga Commission recommendations. that we've got dedicated prosecutors that have been assigned to come to Gauteng to work with the task team. For every case they want to prosecute, they must write to the national director and seek permission. There's cases that almost a month, we're still waiting for decisions. We're still waiting for delegation for them to prosecute. So those restrictions that exist in legislations are part of the problem. Then you fight with the police and say, you've arrested a person and a person is walking on the street. It is because it cannot be prosecuted for whatever reason that the NPA has, that the public is not aware of. Presiding officers, we've got the Magistrate Commission and we've got the Judicial Commission, the Judicial Service Commission, who also might need to come on board and look at the ethical behaviors of the presiding officers. If we're to fix the system, it can't be the SAPS alone. So inviting the researchers to go and look at the entire value chain of the justice system in order to fix it. A police officer or a law enforcement officer, a lawyer representing a person arrested, a prosecutor, and the presiding officer. There's something that not right there. And the last one, of course, it's our colleagues in brown uniform. We can hide it, but the honest truth is, our correctional facilities are the breeding grounds of crime and gangs. Say what you like. They are a breeding grounds of gangs. They walk in there innocent, not knowing much. They come out there being coached into being numbers, and they can speak the language. One of the officials was arrested recently, I think last week, wanting to take contrabands into one of the correctional facilities here, an official. So that tells you that there's something wrong inside the very same correctional centers that we think we are sending people to come back, change ourselves a question. Is our correctional facilities doing what the government wants them to do? Until we interrogate those things, let's forget about dealing with gangs. Because the breeding ground is in prison. We chase the street, we arrest them, we send them in prison, they become hard gangs, and they come out with new strategies. And the circle continues again. So I want to invite you to look at the entire place. In all these areas I'm talking about, law enforcement, correction, courts, people, correctional service, we have to look at the individuals that are employed there, whether they are not members of the gangs themselves. Because you can be a gang as a police officer, gang as a lawyer, gang as a prosecutor, and gang as a magistrate or a judge. You can be a gang. There are judges these days that have been removed of the strip of their positions because of unethical behaviors. So nobody's immune. In the criminal way, they say everyone has a price. You pay. So the last two things, Honorable Chair, members, and the public at large, we want to invite you to look at the public service, the provision of the adequate infrastructure to society in order to discourage crime. For instance, we always complain about this when we release our crime stats. Town planning. If people are allowed by the legislation to go and set up, put a shack and put a roof over their head because of the sake of human rights, we must never come back and complain about crime, because we can't expect police to be there. Town planning is important. People must, that's why I say people must be governed by laws and rules. If people are not penalized by doing that, we're going to turn around and say, but the crime is high in Cape Flats. Go and analyze where is the crime in Cape Town. Cape Flats, but where in Cape Flats? Yes, you're going to find it in build-up areas, but you're going to find majority of it in informal settlement. So why was the informal settlement allowed to be there to start with? So those are the reforms that need to be looked at. Town planning would include, of course, roads, design where people must stay, parks, schools, playgrounds for the kids and stuff like that. Those are the things that must be catered for so that the kids have got something to do. And also we want to invite this committee to also look at these social grants that we have, because they're part of our problem that are encouraging teenagers to be pregnant and unplanned pregnancy. And then you get a mother that has got 3 kids. He gets grant. He have these kids because he wants grant, and he leaves the kids with the grandmother and he goes away. And the grandparents must then look after these kids, and the grandparents cannot do that. They turn around these kids and they take the grandparents' money. And they end up doing what is wrong because there's no one who's adult at home to be able to help them to grow. So we want to plea with that, that we be assisted with that. And the last one, financial well-being. Honorable Chair members, we want to make sure that business remain in South Africa. So the ease of doing business is something that must be looked at. Companies cannot pack and go to the neighboring countries because, say, it's difficult to operate in the country. Why is it difficult? It could be the laws that allow them to set up their business. Could be the labor laws that we have, where we demand so much, and they end up saying, if I set up in Lesotho and set up in Mozambique, I'll make more money, so let me rather move. There are many businesses that are moving as a result. And what happens after that? The citizens in the country are left without jobs. So we need to encourage business to stay in the country so that it can create opportunities for people to get employment. And lastly, maybe looking at this government public works program, we ask ourselves as law enforcement on today we're dealing with tenders, corruption in tenders, and we ask ourselves a question. With this high level of unemployment, why is government issuing tenders for people to build a school? There are kids that have done engineering. They can be able to supervise the construction of the school. There are people that don't have that education that can be employed by government to mix the cement and put those bricks up as artisans. And then we have a school, we have a clinic, we have a hospital, we have a police station. But all that is outsourced. We have a road. We even outsource the scraping of a gravel road as government. Why government does that? So this outsourcing, it's what breeds this criminality. And what then happens, it leaves people unemployed. And when people are unemployed, they sit and do nothing. And someone said, an idle mind is a devil's playground. So when people are not engaged with anything, they are going to do crime. So we want to encourage that if we want to have a solution for the gangs in the Western Cape or anywhere else in the country, we must look at this holistic environment of solving a problem. If we're going to think that law enforcement is a solution, I've said it before, most of us, we're going to take off our jacket to become citizens, the problem will remain there. So we have to, as a collective for our own children, do something extraordinary. And someone say, we don't need to be political when we address this issue. And I agree with it. We really have to take away our flags and badges on political parties and come back as citizens and say, what is the problem and how do you fix it? So we appreciate this engagement, Honorable Chair and members, and as management of the SAPS, we've been taking notes, and we're going to go back and engage ourselves at the head office and try and see what can we do to adjust in terms of responding to this crisis. But thank you very much for giving us an opportunity. I want to thank you, sir. Doctor.